All right, hello and welcome. Brett here with ClickMail. So in this video, we're going to build on what we've talked about so far, which is essentially, life is going to give you lemons. You're going to get punched in the face. There's just no way around it. That's reality. And nobody likes talking about it. We don't like thinking about it because it's kind of depressing. It's also the world we live in. And if we don't have a plan, we're gonna fall. We're not going to get through it. So let's talk about how people respond and how you can be successful responding through suffering and pain and hardship. Okay, because that's like the number one skill we need. Um, so one of the ways that I learned a lot of this was through mixed martial arts. I love mixed martial arts, and one of the trainers that I had, who was essentially former special forces. I don't know exactly what he did, but one of the scariest guys I've ever met, named Michael. And he was a personal combat trainer that I was with for a while, and I really loved it. He told me something that really stuck. He said, "You never rise to the occasion. You always fall to your level of training." And that really stuck with me because he was saying, when you have this idea of that guy on the battlefield and things get really bad, and what does he do? He puts his life on the line and just is overcome with courage and just runs into the fray and saves people's lives. He goes, people can't just do that. You don't get into these super intense, life is going to take you out situations and then suddenly just develop courage. He goes, you don't have that. He goes, you only have what you train to have when you're in those situations. He goes, the reason why, these heroic military war heroes have this level of courage is because they train it. They train. How do you train courage? Well, what is courage? Courage is not the absence of fear. You probably heard this. It's not the absence of fear. It is the ability to act in spite of the fact that you're terrified. Okay, so the most courageous war hero can be absolutely terrified, but he can act in spite of it. Isn't that what we're talking about? When life is just beating you up and you're feeling like you've totally failed, how do you keep going? How do you act instead? Well, courage is part of it. Okay, so how do they get to the point where they're terrified? They're afraid of losing their life and losing the people around them, and yet they stand up underneath that pressure and go forward anyway. How do they do that? They train for it. Okay, so how do they train for it? And understanding that can help us to understand how we train, and we'll actually see this in the Bible, how we train for our own life and ministry. Okay. The way that military trains for this is called stress inoculation training. And this is in any number of different fields. This is also in counseling. So I want to show you how this sort of truth applies to multiple areas of reality so you understand it, and then we're going to apply it to us. Okay, so when I worked with this guy named Michael, he trained with the SEALs. He was not a SEAL. He was in the bomb disposal, and he supported special forces. He trained with the SEALs. He trained with the CIA. Scariest guy I've ever met. And he would do with me what is called stress inoculation training. And what do I want to be able to do? I don't want to be a mixed martial artist for fun. I don't want to cage fight in the ring and be WW, like, what am I saying? WWE, like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what it is now. Mixed martial arts champion, whatever that is. Like, I don't care. What I want is I just want to be able to perform under pressure. And I have been in situations where I have had people, unfortunately, threaten my life on the sidewalk and threaten to shoot me. And do I think that's likely to happen again? No, I'm not paranoid. But also, if it does, I'd love to not feel totally out of control. I'd love to feel confident in my ability to respond under that amount of pressure. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, what you do is you have increasing levels of stress, and you're trained to be comfortable under that level of stress. And so this is what I did with this guy, Michael, whose call sign in the military was Havoc, if that tells you anything about him. And what he did was he would put me under increasing and increasing levels of stress. So, for example, the first week, I was like, okay, I'm going to start training with Havoc. And I met him through some other guys and friends of mine that train for military and weapons training and different things. And so, they said, "Oh, you've got to talk to this guy." So I talked to him. He said, "Yeah, we'll start." And the first thing he does when I get into the class with him is he puts me on gym equipment. And I'm like, I thought I was learning to be a weapon or something. He's like, "No, you don't get to learn that till later." It's like, what do you mean? He's got some kind of weird sensei thing going on. So what does he do? He just has me work out. And, because you can totally tell, but he has me work out and just do all this exercise and get exhausted. And then he brings me in and, busts out the training knives, the plastic training knives. And it's like, well, hold on a second here. I'm already tired. And he goes, "You don't get to train for real life scenarios when you have lots of energy. That's not when it's hard." He goes, "It's hard when you've got nothing left to give." And that's when we would get into the training. So every single time I trained with him, he would exhaust me and then he'd give me the combat training. And so it would start, he'd exhaust me on the workouts, and then we'd do knife fighting with plastic knives. And it was relatively, like still fairly stressful because he's very large, but also, it's not like really painful or anything. And as I got the different skill sets down with certain types of weapons, whether it's gun disarms or whatever, he would have me work out harder. And then we would move to, instead of plastic and rubber knives, it would be metal, dull metal training knives. And so they're super dull. They can't actually stab you. But when you get hit with a piece of metal, it really hurts. And so now the stress is even higher. And it's okay. You know how to perform when you're tired. Now you know how to perform when you're tired with a plastic weapon. Now you're going to know how to perform when you're exhausted when it's a metal weapon. And it goes up and up and up from there. And the message that he kept telling me is, you control your body. Your mind controls your body. Your body does not control your mind. And that's why it had to keep getting harder and harder and harder slowly, is because you naturally get to a point and you're like, it's impossible to continue. My body's telling me I'm so exhausted. I have to give up. That's why you respond to your level of training. So what did he do? He says, every time I'm exhausted and I'm about to, like, I don't know if I can keep going. No, that's exactly where he wants me, right on the edge of myself, because that is where I have the ability to grow. That's where I'm not even using my mind. I'm using my will and I'm using my reflexes, my instincts. And so your mind controls your body always under every circumstance. And so he says, get up. We're going to keep going. And we'd keep going and we'd push past where I thought I could be. And that's when I got to be done. And then the next time, so the more stress you can handle, the more stress you can handle. And I remember at one point, this one was crazy. At one point, he said, we're going to do water work. And we did. And I was like, what does water work mean? What do you fight in the water? Like, this is ridiculous. I don't even know what he's talking about. He said, yeah, just come ready to be wet. I'm like, all right. So we go into the pool at this place we're training, and he has me swim underwater. Okay, so we've been working on these chokes and how to escape from chokes. And, he's choking me out of the water for a couple of weeks and showing me how to turn and how to move and how to throw them and all this stuff. And so it's like, okay, I'm trained. I know how to perform under a certain level of stress if someone's choking me. He's really choking. Well, we get into the water. He says, I want you to go all the way to the other end of the pool. I want you to swim underwater as far as you can. And I'm like, okay, we're going to practice holding our breath. All right, cool, because I can swim underwater. Okay, so I'm swimming as far as I can. As soon as I come up, he puts me in a chokehold. I'm not wearing goggles and I don't really open my eyes underwater, but as soon as I come up, boom, I'm in a chokehold and I can't breathe. And he's dunking me underwater and bringing me back up just enough for me to breathe. And then he's putting me back under. And now I have to escape from the choke as I've been trained, but under a higher level of stress. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, wow, water work. I get it. Now it makes sense what this is about. Now, of course, this guy's highly trained and he's not going to let me get hurt. He's had this done to him. He's been under even more intense training on this. And he knows my limitations, which is why I wanted to work with him privately as opposed to just some group of people in an MMA ring, because, they're not really sensitive to your personal limitations. So he is pushing me right to the edge. And I know in my mind, I'm not going to die. But what is my mind telling me? What is my body telling me? You're drowning, you're going to die. And so as we did this over and over and over, I began to have this ability to respond under the pressure, not because I could think. It is because I had training. And when my mind left and I could no longer think, my body was able to take over because I had the training for that situation. And so what happens then is when I come up against a scenario in real life, and Lord, Lord willing, that never happens. And the stress goes up because who knows, something crazy is happening. Like I told you, the one time I had this guy come up to me on the sidewalk and tell me, I'm going to put a bullet in your brain. And thank God he didn't have a gun with him. I didn't know that at the time, but I was like, and I'd already had a fair bit of training at that point, so I was still fairly confident. But it's like, if that ever happened again, I don't think it will. Everybody else starts freaking out, but I can be calm because I know how to respond. It's not good. I don't want to be there, but I can be calm and I can respond. I can be the one person in the room who just has an average functional response. And that might be what it takes to keep people safe in that scenario. Well, this is also true. So you increase your ability to handle stressful, difficult, hard life situations. And then when, let's say I've trained and I can handle a 4 out of 10 difficulty situation, and then life throws me a 3, nobody else can respond to a 3. I can respond to a 3. And then I am blessed in proportion to my ability to respond to the 3 when nobody else could. Okay. But if life throws me a 7, I'm still going to flop. Okay. And that's okay because we're not always trained to a 7, but the point is we want as much as we can get. Now let's move this over, excuse me, to let's go psychology and counseling. Okay. There is, now that I'm needing to pull this up, I forget, exposure therapy. Okay. When people have phobias, fear, let's go agoraphobia, the fear of leaving the house because the world is terrible and dangerous and so scary. I had a professor in college who legitimately had, I don't actually remember the name of this phobia, but it was birds. She had a terrible fear of birds. And so she went to what's called exposure therapy. And what does exposure therapy do except expose you in greater and greater and greater amounts to the thing you're terrified of? And so in the case of like needle therapy, and Jordan Peterson talks about this type of exposure therapy, which is highly effective, by the way. Okay, we're going to sit down. We're just going to talk about needle. No, we're not. We don't have any needles around. There's no needles. Let's just talk about it. What is it that's scary about it? Well, oh gosh, it's sharp. It could get you in the eye, And we talk about it and we just talk about it and we talk about it until the person is comfortable talking about needles. That's stress inoculation training. It's the same thing, just on a very small level. And that's okay because frankly, life's tough and we just need to go one tiny percent and good for that person who just can talk about the needle. There's no judgment, right? And then what happens? Well, we're going to talk about a needle. Okay, we've been talking about a needle. Let's just look at a picture of a needle. And before we do, is it going to hurt you? No, of course it can't hurt me. It's just a picture. And it's like, okay, look, I'm going to hold the picture way back here. And at any moment you can tell me to put it away and we'll put it away because you're in control here. That gives them a sense of control. Okay, I can do this. And then, okay, picture, can we bring it a little closer? A little closer, a little closer. Can you look at the picture right here? Yeah, okay, I can do that. It makes me really uncomfortable. And what do? We just do that over and over and over until they can pick up the picture of the needle and look at it. And then what happens? Okay, we're going to have a needle in the room, but it's going to be way over there on the bookcase. And if you want me to go and you want me to take it out of the room and throw it in the trash, we will. But it's going to be in the room. And we're going to talk about a needle while a needle's in the room. And we do that until they can hold the needle and until finally maybe they can actually get a shot that they need to have for health reasons. And so what do? We build the exposure to the stressful event until we know we're capable of responding higher and higher degrees of stress. And then the person is functional under these certain levels of stress. And that is called exposure therapy. So the exact thing that I'm talking about, you fall to your level of training, you have to train people to overcome fear. So is that person being courageous when they finally get their shot? They're being super courageous as that guy on the battlefield that's running into the fray with bullets flying around. It's the same thing. That person is so terrified of needles because they're afraid it's going to kill them. Same amount of courage, but to deal with something smaller. Well, good for that person. So we fall to our level of training. Now, when we talk about this in regard to our faith, we all think that when we become a Christian, we're going to continue being a Christian. We all think that when we get married, that our marriage is going to be the one that lasts. And what happens is life punches us right in the face. The thing you didn't think could happen happens. And then we have Christians being divorced at the same rate as those who are secular. We see our friends fall away from their faith. And then, you know, I haven't fallen away from my faith, and I don't think I'm going to, but of course, that's what everybody thinks. And when things get hard enough, that can happen. So what we need to do is we need to get trained to sustain hardship. Okay, so this lesson is to show you how training and inoculation to stressful situations is going to make you capable of living out a faithful life, just in life and in business and ministry and family. Okay, so that's the point here. Now, all of the rest of the videos that we're going to go through is going to show you how to do that. How do you increase that level of training? Because this is going to tell you sort of how to, and then you need to go do it and continue doing that throughout the course of your life to be stronger and stronger and stronger. So this is going to be the parallel to, this course is essentially going to be the parallel to exposure therapy and psychology, which is a very effective method of therapy, along with cognitive behavioral therapy, but exposure is relevant to what we're talking about. It is equivalent to what special forces people go through when they train for military combat. They go through the worst, most grueling situations and higher and higher and higher levels of intensity until they can endure things that no other human can endure. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And frankly, that's basically what the Bible promises us. When you look at Jesus, the word Christian means little Christ. We are to become Christ. And how did Christ go out? Christ went out the most gruesome, horrible death that anybody could possibly die. And we're following in his footsteps. The Bible does not promise you a comfy life where things are super easy. If anything, it promises you difficulty and hardship, but worthwhile difficulty and hardship as we pursue Christ. And you have to be able to sustain and endure underneath it. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to, as we continue in the course, you're going to see how this mindset is set forward in the Bible and how we do get the training and bear up underneath the struggle. So thanks so much for being with me in this video. We're talking about you fall to your level of training. And in the next videos, let's get into how to get that training. We'll see you there. God bless.